Well, everybody, it is your favorite three amigos: Cliff, Hi, Jason at 4, Big Swear, of course. And I didn't tell them yet. I was, I had my phone with me, and I put a calendar reminder, of course, to remind myself 5 o'clock Eastern, get on, with these guys. And I set it like, 10 or 15 minutes early. So I'm in the little crypto shack, my spot now. And I bought these wheels and tires for that golf cart a while back, like when I first got it. And they've been sitting over there. I'm just like, I'll do that some other time. So finally, I ain't got really too much to do. I planted a couple of little small trees. One's called a Jamaican cherry tree, and a moringa or something's the other one. So my wife's like, plant those trees for me. I'm like, all right. So I planted the trees. Had a little free time. I'm putting the tires on. I hear my phone, ding, ding. Oh, crap. What is that? Oh, shoot, it's the three amigos. I'm like, now I got like 7 minutes. So I'm cranking the, last couple tires, cranking the lug nuts down. I just finished it. My wife came up, and I drove her back and sweating like a pig. So I wiped up and just came in here, ran back, and just barely made it nick of time. So
you didn't go into your makeup room and have your makeup staff get you all ready?
No, I took a leaf blower and just kind of, like we do out in the country.
I didn't even comb my hair. I put on a hat because you guys always shine too much, in a good way. So I decided to go big on the top of my head today.
It's too hot where we're at to have a hat. It's sort of brutal for us. One of those unusual years. We're going to get heat while they get the polar vortex stuff East Coast. There's snow showing up in weird places already.
Well, you already said that in the reports. I mean, you said that a while back. That's what we're going to see. And, maybe shame on me a little bit. I don't know. I've had a number of people tell me some instances, hey, check this out, Cliff, I nailed it. And I didn't go out, what about hit, do one of these videos. It's kind of sometimes I wait for it to be a little bigger kind of thing.
Yeah. Let it
I'm thinking,
up a bit.
We've already seen so much of that. Let's let some other stuff happen, before I go out and do a video. But so anyways,
the hurricanes definitely nailed it. I'm just scared sitting here on top of a fault here in California. I'm waiting for the earthquakes to come, and I'm like, holy moly.
Oh yeah,
well, hey guys, we're nowhere near as bad as people that are sitting on some of the active volcanoes. I've gotten some emails from people, and it's like, well, we were scheduled to move out, X number of days from now, but the mountain up there is smoking and spewing rocks and stuff. What do you think we ought to do? And then I tell them, well, you ought to, grow up and take responsibility for your own damn life and run like hell.
Yeah, get the hell out of there.
Yeah, with St. Helens, having seen that, but the earthquakes are going to go as a result of some of the South Sea volcano stuff that's going on, and of course I don't know that it's anything more than intriguing universal coincidence, but that's in the same damn region as those rays from Antarctica.
Oh yeah, they went right through there.
Right, and there's people that are saying that those rays are for weather control, that they're pulsed lasers. And okay, maybe so, but it's behaving a little odd in the pulse insofar as I'm concerned. And I don't see that maybe, I'm just too obtuse, I just don't grasp it. But somehow I would think it more direct to be beaming them at Florida as opposed to Hawaii if you want to cause hurricanes in Florida, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I don't see them as being connected, but they're sure doing a lot of that crap in the microwave range. So maybe it's related to the volcanoes getting all itchy out in that area, and all of the stressors around in our neck of the woods. And so I noticed that there were about 7 days here where everybody was very lethargic. Not just myself being old or anything like that, but young people around me also reporting the same kind of, oh, I'm sleepy today, that kind of thing. And what a lot of people don't recognize is that's could be an earthquake precursor sign, because of the waves that are coming up out of the plates as they're getting ready to rumble. And I know people that get intensely sleepy just before an earthquake.
Well, it's like the animals. So, remember when they would say, like, especially maybe Big's neck of the woods, California area, they would have, they said a lot of times you could tell by looking at the missing pets section of the newspaper, because pets would run. They'd get away because they didn't know what was happening, and they could sense it way in advance. So all these pets gone missing, so you'd see an influx in the newspaper of all these missing pets people would post in there, and next thing
you know, kaboom. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's always like in retrospect they analyze all this data, because your dog goes away, the first thing you'd think about is not, oh shit, there's coming an earthquake.
Yeah.
And you can look back and say, man, this this was one of the precursors. But I've gone through 4 or 5 earthquakes now. Being the old guy that I am, you have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea it's coming, and I can look back and say, well, I was kind of feeling weird that morning, but I don't know if it's due to whatever it was. But you hit that point in time, that moment that earthquake hits, and you're not ready for it. You just pray that you've done a lot of preparation around your house, so that if you don't have food or water for a few weeks or months, you can deal with it.
Yeah, I remember the one that hit us in 2001, the odd feeling that I had that morning. It was like on February 29th, was that one of the leap years? 28th, it was the end of February. And I felt odd for a few hours. And then I went outside to get some tools to work on the hot water tank, which had mysteriously shut down. It wasn't working. What happened was the heating elements in it, I discovered later, had literally sheared off, both of them. And so they'd been wobbling inside the tank and basically torn themselves loose without me knowing about it. And I go outside to get some tools, and then I looked around, and boy, there's not a bird in sight, and it's absolutely quiet. And then kaboom! And one of the major bridges in Olympia collapses, and it takes them 2 years to rebuild it. So yeah, you just don't really know about that kind of thing. I am not aware of having any strange feelings or any sensations prior to that particular day. So, but this time we had the Mexico earthquake, and who knows what's going on as the plates realign themselves. Maybe it's not earthquake, maybe it's just the plate realignment that's causing everybody to get these tectonic waves that make them a little bit sleepy. Or maybe it's the chemtrails.
Could it be the expansion? I think all this stuff is related to the expansion, I would assume. And it comes in bursts and waves, and I guess there was a solar flare like 2 days before the Mexico earthquake lately.
Yep.
And it takes about 2 days for those the energies to come in. So, I would say that's a huge correlation as far as solar flares versus earthquakes, and it makes sense if we do believe that the planet is expanding.
Well, there's also the other issue too, and that is that everybody thinks we're in the heliocentric model, and we're in a big circle with all the other planets, sort of like in a racetrack, right? All at the same layer around the middle of the sun. But if you just collapse that into the cone shape, then it's much more meaningful. But what's going on right at the moment is the two largest planets for mass and dynamic action, are Jupiter and Saturn, are nearer each other, and that's occurring on our side of the sun relative to our orbit. And that happens every 425 years, and it lasts for about 125 years. And we're into, I think, maybe 16. It's hard with the astronomy because, it's like what point in a moving space do you pick as a reference, and it doesn't matter because you've moved past it in 5 minutes anyway. But in any event, we're probably in it anywhere from like 16 to 25 years. And so as this goes along, you see huge levels of increases sporadically in seismic activity, which includes volcanoes and stuff, as part of the entree into the mini ice age. And it makes a lot of sense. You get the planet shifting around, the magma and everything, and it's just like in your house when an earthquake hits, all the dust comes out of all the seams, and so we get a big poof of magma and all of the volcanic ash and stuff into the atmosphere, and it starts cooling the planet at the same time that the sun's doing a diminishing. And it's probably doing a diminishing because of this same 425-year cycle with Jupiter and Saturn being closer to each other than usual. And usually they're more or less opposite each other on their conical orbit behind the sun. And they're also a little bit closer to each other, and they're closer to us, and they're causing elongation in Earth's orbit. And of course, in so doing, they're also pulling and stretching out our oblate spheroid. Everybody thinks of Earth as, or any planet as solid. And it probably can be argued that really it's just a bunch of rocks being held together by gravity. And so solidity is questionable at best. But yeah, I think we're really in for it. And earthquakes are showing up all over with Mexico, and now the volcanoes out in the South Pacific that are getting jittery. And so actually it may do the earthquake activity some good if some of the pressure were relieved with some of these volcanoes. But if you go back and look through history at 425 years, with that 125-year range in there, you start seeing, oh, Krakatoa. Oh, this. This
Big
other
one.
super volcano, So all these buggers seem to go off in the same time period. And we also have all of the other stuff.
Do you think the Earth changes, all the cataclysmic type of things that are happening right now? Do you think that will play into that transition from the old monetary system, which is really collapsing and falling in on itself now, and the cryptocurrencies, which is growing? Will that further that along? Because it's going to, the costs of these hurricanes are just unfathomable.
Is the cost. And even before the hurricane, even before Harvey in Houston, the Chinese have been discussing maybe 6 months. Prior to that, you've seen an uptick in articles being put out by PBOC and some of the other quasi-state entities discussing the cost of social insurance, okay? And they're not talking about like Social Security. They're not talking about Medicare kind of things, although some of the health aspects were peripherally discussed. Now, these are in the main. I can only think of one that was actually an official government document. So you got to be careful in reading too much into them, because it could be trial balloons. They're trying to see, if these things are going to float off and a crowd follow behind them. But nonetheless, they've been discussing the cost of the increasing impacts of Earth on infrastructure. Okay, so that's how they're viewing it. And that could be, I have to put a caveat, that could be the way I've got my translation set up. I could be placing object and subject in the wrong relationship because a lot of this stuff is done in simplified Chinese, and so much nuance is lost. But in any event, it looks as though what they're viewing is an escalating expectation for infrastructure repair over an increasingly longer period of time with no real plateau in sight. And thus, how are the financial infrastructure elements going to deal with a drain that is basically, and this was the conclusion, not capped and not fixed, and whose expectation can or should not be deminimized because of the things like the super typhoons. And one super typhoon can set back, several regions in China, which for us are, fundamentally population bases like 2 or 3 times the United States, can set back that much of their population in a 2 or 3 days and destroy 25 years worth of work. And so there's a lot of thought being given into the cost of Earth changes, the directions it's going to have on science, all kinds of cool stuff if you really read into it. Again, difficult for English speakers, but quite fascinating. So that's really where the Chinese are coming from in that regard. And it brings us back to the cryptos. Because, see, here's their thing. Chinese are in the same, at the level of officialdom, but not necessarily government. So we have that here as well. We've got the powers that be in the U.S. that are within officialdom. Many of these guys are former government. They drop in and they work for government. They drop out and this kind of thing. So at any given moment, they may not be in government, but you can be pretty sure that they've got some level of official speak behind them if they're out in the public mulling about things, like Jamie Dimon, right? He was out doing that shit because he was told to, because it made sense for J.P. Morgan and the people that are backing J.P. Morgan, et cetera, to try and, let's say, equalize the perceptions of Bitcoin's prices. And it wasn't that they were trying to knock the price down. They were afraid of a bounce back in spite of China. There was a big hope, my assumption, there was a big hope on the part of officialdom that when China said, no, you guys, we're going to shut everything down, that they were hoping Bitcoin would crash and crash hard. And, they were thinking maybe 800, 1800 in that range. and then they'd have another couple of years, is my thinking about what I think they were anticipating. And it didn't happen. And so they brought Jamie Dimon out because the bounce back was coming back a little too hard. And what they didn't realize was that so many people were sitting on the sidelines waiting for something like this to occur to try and get more of their funds into the crypto stuff. But getting back to the Chinese documents, they're actually talking about or speculating how would a state entity structure a wealth guarding program that was basically cryptocurrency based if its intent was to be able to be munched out and pieces of it spent out over time in variable amounts in relation to earth changes fundamentally. And so it was a complex algorithm, and you can see why I got hung up in it. It was interesting computing.
So
but yeah, the Chinese have got a real problem.
My take on Jamie Dimon was kind of the same thing in China. You know, the timing of it all, they did it in concert. It was definitely to kind of let some air out of what they assume is a bubble. But if you look at Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan, they're in almost every large crypto company now. They're investing in all these crypto companies. They have 100 employees, over 100 employees, specifically dedicated to injecting crypto solutions into their business model because it can rip out all those costs.
Oh yeah, it's hugely efficient.
I mean, Jamie Dimon is he's either a liar and a con man, which we all know he is, or he's just flat out lying.
That's just it's a both and. It's not an either or.
Because he's not stupid on this stuff. He's been trained by Blythe Masters and all his crypto gurus that the world's going to go this way. So his whole company is moving that way. But he does the same thing that a lot of the gold guys do, is say blockchain is good, but Bitcoin is bad. But the whole theory that the blockchain is a truth machine, it is an amazing truth machine. And where do we need more truth than in the currency markets, in money? That's where the real problem lies. So to split those apart is kind of a ridiculous argument. Yes, I know Jamie Dimon makes a living off creating fiat money out of thin air, but still, to say the blockchain is so great on everything it touches except money is just ridiculous. And I kept thinking, okay, these crypto guys aren't really selling because of what Jamie Dimon has said, are they? Because most of the crypto people, at least not the traders, but the small guys, are keen on what the banksters do. They're old good silver investors. They're looking for a different way. So having the front guy for the banks come out and say, "Oh, Bitcoin sucks, it's a scam," I don't know anybody who follows me that would sell their Bitcoin on that comment.
Yeah, but you're making a couple of assumptions there that I don't think are true. One of them is that it would be basically older people that are buying into Bitcoin, that kind of thing. It actually, I think it's Joe and younger, right? I think Joe's got a huge following of younger people based on the demographics that I sweep up when I catch this and put it in the mall. So Joe's following is, I would say, drops down significantly after age 12. But you'd be shocked at how many people 12 to 16 are following Joe. Now, some of those guys, or some of the people, I don't know the sex of the gender, but there's this one guy that's 16 and he's made over $1 million by having tumbled into cryptos and getting money from somewhere to start off and has, built it all up. I think he's British. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at his videos or anything. He's got his own following, but I'm aware of him because these things pop up in places like Steemit. There's written discussion about them, which I pick up in my spiders, but I don't have time to go and pursue details and look at the videos, right? So I can't validate some of the details. They may be misreported in the text, and I'm just picking them up, assuming that they were accurately reported. But so I actually think that is representative. I know that that's representative of a very large chunk of people that you guys would not consider that would be following your videos, okay? And so there's probably places in, very dangerous places to go where any of our faces would be recognized and we'd be welcomed right on in. So I know that there's a lot of crypto community in various different, let's say, fringe elements of society. Everything from bikers to gamers to skateboarders, all of this kind of thing, right? And so we don't really think about it that way. But those people, some of those people, I don't think are selling per se on that reason. But a lot of these guys I noticed are naive about trading and how it's done, and so they get spooked by what's done on Ether Delta and some of these other places. And they don't understand that at the same time Jamie Dimon is out there saying blah, 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 Bitcoin bad, they've got an algorithm that's trying to pop the price down in steps by selling small amounts for a loss and just do it continuously because they've got reasonably large amounts of whatever it is they're trying to crush. And it's the best they can do because they don't have the control that they have with the paper contracts. But I do see that people in their speech are reacting to this, to the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt. So it's maybe it's just the weak hands thing, not ever being a trader, not being involved actively in markets really, other than having bought stock occasionally and sat back and wondered what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
I just couldn't say, right? But there's an emotional component there to it.
Yeah, and they probably haven't been through any of the big Bitcoin drops, and they haven't hardened themselves. So this will create a new generation of hardened Bitcoiners to move forward.
Yeah,
that's right.
Like, and I try to tell everybody. I just had my sister get in. She wanted in on Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. So I had her sign up on Coinbase. She's already set up. I had one of my other bosses, one of the other owners. Hey, I want to get in now. Okay, helped her get in. Had another employee at work, and I haven't been reaching out to any of these people, by the way.
Right.
Another employee at work, I want in too. He got in the other day when it got hit pretty good, so he's already up. Just a few days later. Even though we're all still waiting for it to go back to 4,000 something Bitcoin, he's looking at his like, oh, this is great, because he got in on the big dip, which is natural. So everybody I talk to, I'm always telling them, listen, put this little Blockfolio app on there. It's good because you can track all your assets and stuff. I was like, but don't sit there and stare at it every day, because if you do, and I said, you can, I guess, but if you do, and you see one of these waterfall sell-offs, you're going to be like gut-wrenching, oh my God, well, oh no. Don't react, don't do anything about it. It's going to recover. This has happened like 5-6 times now. Don't worry about it. So I have to preface everything with that, tell everybody, it's going to happen, be prepared for it to happen, but as a matter of fact, when it does happen, throw a little more money into it. So they're all like, well, all right, well, you follow it, so if you don't mind, send a little email out to us and just say, hey, it's down today, buy a little bit more. So I said, I'll do that. So it's funny how many people are starting to get in. I'm talking, these are some older folks, that I'm talking about at work that they've heard enough. They want in on it, and I don't blame them.
Well, they're probably hurting enough too on the dollar shenanigans, But that's that's a good point about the don't follow it every day. It'll drive you crazy. And really, I hear all these people saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's so volatile. You can't use it as money." And it's like, no, people. Bitcoin is stable. It's the wild gyrations of the fiat currency on the other side that make it appear to be volatile. And what we're doing is we're buying a few Bitcoins because we know that they're going to build up such a huge amount of other currency that the numbers associated with Bitcoin will become larger and larger and larger, which will trick us into thinking we're wealthy. And it'll trick other people into thinking we're wealthy when we spend those Bitcoin in a little while in the future. And, oh yeah, it will be real wealth because the fiat will just collapse and squish all that stuff into Bitcoin.
Well, let's think about this too. You got, and I hate to say it, but I almost can't blame Donald Trump for him saying, we need to just get rid of the debt ceiling. Every time we come across this thing, we do the same thing anyways. We kick it to can. So he's like, why are we doing this? Let's just let it go where it's going to go. And I think he's doing that because he now knows just how much money we need to get ready to print. Yeah. And they'll be able to use the earthquake stuff, and whether it's Mexico or one hits here, the hurricane. Yeah. I mean, they're talking about these two hurricanes that hit Florida and Texas, causing hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in damage. And you've got all these people that some had mortgages, but they didn't have the proper insurance and all this stuff. They're going to end up walking. So once again, I'm waiting to hear the words, oh, we need another bailout coming or another something. They're going to need so much money to be printed. Everybody in Congress probably already knows this, and I think if they push that, it'll just go, yep, we need to stop messing with this debt ceiling thing because We're about to print like no one's ever seen before. And if that
Well,
happens,
It's an issue of political control, though. See, it's not really about finance, in my opinion. I think they just use it as a lever, whichever is the party in power uses as a lever against the other ones. And I don't really think that any of them up there ever really consider it meaningful.
I think
It would be strange, to be in the Congress.
If you look at the where the assets are held that are underwater, so to speak, that have been destroyed, it's in the insurance companies and in the pension funds, because the banks pretty much sell everything off they can, and the pension funds buy up the mortgage-backed securities, and then the the insurance companies insure all this stuff, and they're buying the mortgage-backed securities too. So I think some of the big banks will, obviously they're going to take some hits, but they're not going to take the brunt of the hit. I think the brunt of the hit is going to be in the pension funds and definitely the insurance companies that they don't expect. They expect big things to happen and they prepare for it, but they don't expect these gigantic things to happen. And if you look at AIG had to get bailed out because they were insuring the derivatives on this stuff. I think we're going to see another one of those AIG type moments where someone who kind of went out on the limb on derivatives is going to get nailed because they didn't expect something out of the blue to happen on this kind of magnitude.
Well, we're also replicating things like the bond crises that led to the explosion of the South Sea bubble and the led to the crash in, we're talking hundreds of years ago, and led to the crash of the first shares market in the 1700s, bankrupt, what's his name, Newton. Newton was a curious guy, right? Really smart fellow, mathematician. He saw that there was this. He owned had all of his wealth in shares in a South American venture, and he sold at a good profit. But yet, even he was sucked back in later because it still kept going up and up and up. When everything told him that he needed to sell and get out, and just keep his profits. He'd made like maybe 2,000 or 3,000% profit on his money. And but of course it was the old sort of, oh my God, FOMO, because after he had sold, it still kept going up and up and up and up. And finally, all of his friends had made hundreds of percent more since he sold out. So he reluctantly bought back in. And then, a short period of time later, a huge crash and he loses everything. And that's, I think a lot of that aspect of it is going on with the cryptos. That's kind of the mindset that China has to deal with, right? China is not particularly a problem. China could, in fact, restrict all their citizens from getting access to cryptocurrencies, and it wouldn't make any difference to the future of Bitcoin and what the rest of the world has to do with it. The Russians and the other BRIC nations are so invested in it, even in the Southeast Asian alliance now, absent China. The people are becoming extremely invested in it. New startups are appearing in India and all of these kind of places to take advantage of the fact that this is software. And so the barriers to entry at that level are reasonably small. They're going to escalate, though, because all the people that know how to program this kind of stuff are getting sucked in really quick. And so it'll start making a real premium. So it's kind of like go east, young programmer, and speak DApp, go program distributed applications. But China's got a real problem on their hands because they've got a population that culturally or genetically is susceptible to mass movements in a way that you don't really see in the U.S. And when the crowd moves in China, when the beast turns, the government has to react and pay attention to it because such things cause the fall of governments and the loss of power and bloody revolutions and all of this. And so they've got to be really careful about such things as everybody trying to get into a currency that they can't control. And at the moment, all of China's, it's the same pattern. Okay, this is a planned event. And the event was started where they allowed the exchanges to leak out a couple of months ahead of the actual officialdom letters that there was a shutdown coming. And so the exchange people told everybody that was dealing on their exchanges, hey guys, clampdown coming. And videos appeared about it in Chinese. And people discussed it and so on. It's just like the previous one where they shut down the exchanges, cleaned them up, and then allowed them to come on back in. This one started with the whole, let's shut down all the ICOs. And then it's not really a ban on ICOs. They said it was a control mechanism. And that's what they were very afraid of, because the potential for mass problems in unregulated ICOs in China are much more incendiary and could potentially cause problems to people at the top. And there are some rumors that some people at the top started wondering, are the things they're involved with in the ICO world legit? So somebody may have been scammed at a very high level, and it started them thinking about what was going on with the ICO market in China. So my expectation, I've spent a lot of time with the data this time on this run, dealing with the huge level, maybe 3,000, 4,000% uptick in language that's all about the China situation. The amount of chatter coming in on that was building up, and then the processing started in it, and it still keeps building up new data, even though I'm still processing as rapidly as I can to get through this stuff. And the overwhelming picture is the concern of Chinese officialdom, the fact that they're at a very key pivotal point in their future, which is this 19th People's Congress that's coming up here, and the need to basically have everything be under control and quiet during the next month or so as they ratify their power structure. Because every 5 years, their power structure is vulnerable to change. And when that occurs, it's always and ever been in China a question of how far would the change go. And so is it an orderly swap of power, or are they facing something that is the beginnings of a rebellion, or are they facing something that is going to overwhelm everybody and become a revolution? Because nobody in the power structure wants either of the latter two, but those are real possibilities, because basically every other regime change in China goes into some form of a rebellion or a major power shift. Unlike here in the U.S., where you basically have a nice placid criminal class that is well cared for, like turkeys or geese, and fed their graft, and they only pretend, like in the World Wrestling stuff, to be fighting each other. In China, you actually do have multiple competing criminal or governmental organizations, and the penalty for screw up is death. And you see that happen all the time, where there's a minor quake in the power structure, and a new governor is placed in a Northwest province. And shortly thereafter, 2 or 3 people in the Northwest province get arrested. All their wealth is taken away from them. Their families are basically kicked out of the province, and these guys go to jail, never to be heard from again. And they were, and it's usually not referenced in our media, but they were the former power structure. And it was one gang trying to consolidate power. And so the way to do that is to deprive your enemies of their funding source, et cetera, et cetera. And so China, with 70 to 80,000 riots a year, and I'm not talking, Berkeley-style Antifa things here. I'm talking about, full-on police battles with tens of thousands of rioting individuals. They've got 70 to 80,000 of those in an ordinary year. And with the crazy energies from space, they're well over 122,000, I think, riot events in this past 12 months that required official reports and all of that kind of crap.
You said the 5-year thing, though. When is that next one due?
That was my question.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
That's not timing.
Okay. Well, see, here's what's going to happen. Okay. Well, here's what's going to happen. I'll give you a broad overview, because I'm sort of through most of that part. I'm still processing data on it, so it can maybe change as we go forward. But we're in a funny month. We're going to have the current cryptocurrencies, they're establishing a new pattern. The new pattern is going to take almost a year to come into play, and then it'll be one of those things that the chartists will be able to follow thereafter for a number of years. And we can use a Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin on this, and say that there will be new patterns that will emerge. The Key period here is basically as we are now up until the last 10 days of October. And then in that last 10 days of October, there's going to be all kinds of announcements and crap that will be coming out. A lot of it from China, because that's when their Congress convenes. And that's when the officialdom will begin releasing the plans they've already formed that they're going to get those guys to ratify. And we are not supposed to know about what these plans are ahead of time, and they're being real fierce and closing everything down and keeping everything calm during this period of time as they do this. And then from so the last 10 days of October through November, we're going to be in a fall period that we can think of as hyperinflationary. But because of the Chinese isolation at this stage, the hyperinflationary period won't be yuan-derived, okay? And because we're going to have a USA dollar derivation from that, we're going to get these big spikes in cryptocurrency movements as we go through this period of time, with very much a larger or with a corresponding drop as the fiat currencies react back and forth. Now, it's unclear whether it's going to be generalized. In other words, we may be sitting here and see one day that the New Zealand dollar takes a big hit for some reason and goes way up against Bitcoin, when the Canadian dollar and the US dollar and that kind of stuff is more or less stable, maybe also rising, but nowhere near that level. And so this is the kind of stuff being described in the data, is basically very ill currencies that are going to exhibit this behavior of being erratic and volatile relative to the stability of Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. And I say cryptocurrencies in a very loose sense, but I'm really only referring like top 5 or 6 will be reasonably stable. And that'll be the pattern from these last 10 days in October as the announcements start coming out, all through November and into December. And is this hyperinflationary kind of thing. Also at its slant, like the crocodile teeth. So each and every spike, even though there's a big drop down, the spike itself doesn't go below that jumping up point. So in general, still up. And then in winter, for maybe 6 weeks or so, there's temporal issues here as well. But for maybe 6 weeks or so from the December solstice onward, so first couple of weeks in February, we're going to have a reasonably well-behaved, regular kind of cryptocurrency market with a general trend line up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% per day kind of thing, though. So well-behaved, not giant spikes, but a really steady pressure building, and it's that pressure language that we see in that period that leads us to the spring eruption of the cryptocurrencies. So the hyperinflation that we're seeing now in the data sets for October, November, and the early part of December doesn't really hit until the end of that 6-week period of time. But it's sort of squeezing itself into the system over winter and into January and into February, such that there's this real percentage pressure all the time on the rising cryptocurrency values. So instead of crocodile teeth in that period, we get a description of these little tiny stairs that are rapidly ascending. And so a stair would be, maybe 1% today, 3% tomorrow, 2% the day after, and so on. But always basically this little tendency towards an upward pressure in the main on the top tier of currencies. Because at the same time, it's looking maybe there will be 5,000 cryptos, 6,000 of them, that'll be available in February. And that's just the start of this. The whole thing just erupts like mad in spring.
Are those cryptos currencies or mainly tokens that
I'm just using cryptocurrencies as a generalized term. I'm not really differentiating between Litecoin and say Veritasium or even Ethereum, which I think of as a token.
Do you see a bigger scrutiny on the ICOs and the valuation of the tokens? I mean, up to now, it's been everybody throwing money at everything, and Even some companies that are non-companies are getting a good bid on the ICOs. You see that changing with the more talking about it, at least of China, and people are saying, hey, we got to regulate these ICOs.
I see that in China, but not in the rest of the world. So the most orderly of all of the markets, of all of the ICO markets, is going to end up being Russia, Ukraine, that area. Okay. The more officialdom endorsed markets are going to be China, and in the rest of the world, it's going to be very much Wild West kind of stuff, with various governments taking what actions they can, including in the U.S. So no, there's not going to be a generalized repression of ICO activity, because it's software. They're basically unable to control the ability of people to write code that run on the network. And once the idea is out, they're screwed. This is why they used to kill people that had new ideas they didn't want introduced into the cultures, right? You show up, you knock on the gate of the city, they take you into a little room and they say, all right, what are you all about? What do you know? Nope, we don't like that idea. Better kill him. We don't want that idea in here, and this sort of thing. But, they're not going to be able to clamp down on it. That's the same issue that China has at the moment. China, at least, is recognizing, insofar as their officialdom language permits them to say in public media, they recognize cryptocurrencies aren't going away. They recognize the unique position that China has relative to cryptocurrencies and the ability to do crypto mining. You notice they haven't shut electricity off on any of those Bitcoin mines, and there's massive ones, right?
I heard they told the CEOs of the Bitcoin miners they can't leave China.
That's the issue.
And to me, that says they're just going to alter the rules a little bit, and you're going to stay here and continue to mine.
Yeah, exactly. And see, this is my expectation. This is the expectation of the data, that starting on the 20th or so of October, we'll start getting little officialdom dribbles of the policy translated out into other languages from Chinese, as they announce that, okay, we'll allow this but not that, this but not that, and so on. Now, what you won't see a lot of is discussions on how they're going to actually implement any of this. So a lot of it on their part is going to be to try and engineer some FUD in specific areas so that people will be scared away from it, more or less, right? Now, Chinese, in that regard, they don't have well, the Chinese in general, the population does not hold their government in high esteem. So, it's a necessary evil. You want to work for it. It's a stable employer. But beyond that, you don't trust them and you don't like them much. But you know that they're required. The attitudes that we're going to see relative to the cryptocurrencies are really interesting, because the Chinese recognize they've got a huge problem. And that is the competition between their currency and cryptos. And it's the same thing that Janet Yellen faces, the competition between the dollar and the cryptos. And, Joe's sister and all the other employees at his work. And okay, so he's a magnet for thinking about cryptocurrencies. But his experience, he's not soliciting these individuals. He's not trying to sell them on the idea. He's not proselytizing this. He's just a living example of someone who prefers not to deal in dollars and the consequences thereof. And people get the idea, oh, geez, old Joe's doing damn well. And he's saying up yours to the dollar. Well, maybe I'll try saying up yours to the dollar and see what happens here. And it's going to just keep continuing, because, of course, we know the fiat currencies are, at the end of their lifespan. And this is a nice, easy, orderly transition, is the people inventing their own money around and the ability to control that outside of the government. Coincidentally, of course, it's all happening as we get into the age of Aquarius, which is all about individual initiative, responsibility. It's the only astro sign that's actually a human, and is the knowledge bearer.
It's pretty interesting, isn't it? That the timing of all this, how stuff just happens like this, and
we're
just flowing right into it, like it was meant to be.
Don't become a coincidence theorist.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Clif, as far as the dying, slow dying or quick dying of the dollar, how far out do the spiders, Webbot, see the fiat money, U.S. dollar hobbling along? Is it a 10-year thing? Is it a 50-year
No.
thing?
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. It's a language thing. It's like salt. Okay, it's like salt lending. I'm never going to be able to say anything meaningful about salt because of the nature of the word that they chose and the emotional connections with it. Okay, so it's sort of like that with the dollar in a minor way. There's an Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, Canadian dollar, Zimbabwean dollar. Ecuador being tied to the dollar. So there's so much language about the dollar that it does show it continuing for decades. However, it's not necessarily meaningful relative to the U.S. dollar as currency because there's a lot of language about that specifically that all seems to trail off from 2020 through into 2022. So basically over those 3 years, because it's inclusive, 2020, 2021, and 2022, the data sets would have, and bear in mind this is long-term language. Okay, anything out beyond 19 months I think is really sketchy, and I don't put a whole lot of personal confidence that things going to mature as it's stated in the language. But over the period of time, over those 3 years, and for a number of years we've had this set pretty continuously gaining support, we're going to see a major shift in the infrastructure here in USA that's going to basically lead us out of a dollar-dominated world. Doesn't mean the dollar goes away, but it means that enough people have made the shift away from it that it's not necessarily meaningful. It also is coincident with a lot of language in the data sets about a shrinking government and about government just deciding, oh no, we don't have the money for that, so we don't care what happens to, that island. You're free to go, Guam or whatever. I'm just making up an example here. But basically, it's an idea of a government shedding bits and pieces of itself that it can't pay for anymore and just seeing what happens.
Kind of like maybe Puerto Rico, because they were $70 billion in debt. Hurricane just devastated the entire island. Now might be a good time for us to say, you know what, we don't got the money to help you all out. Which isn't a good thing, but it looks like we may be running down that path.
That's exactly the path, Joe. That's precisely it. And we see weird things like, in order to help Puerto Rico out, the government tries to do something like sell the Grand Canyon, making a horrible example, right? Something like that. Just trying to do stuff just to make things occur because they're running out of meaningful money. It's not that they're not printing this stuff. It's not meaningful anymore because of the hyperinflation. We're already seeing it here. I mean, gasoline's up, cost of everything is up. This was even before the hurricanes had hit. Yep. So now as the drain on the resources, 75% of the oranges are gone in Florida, so orange juice next year. Those futures are endangered, other crop losses, major damage to herds guys in Texas as a result of this, water pollution, and so it's just going to get worse. And it's not over. We have many more of these anomalous or extraordinary weather events ahead in our future. They're saying now in some of these places, or rather some of the articles that are leaking out from U.S. officialdom are saying that by 2025 we won't be able to grow plants outside. And they're saying crop plants, food crop, because of UV. Now, they're doing things like making a linear projection of current state. And that always bites you in the ass. It always gets you into trouble. So the global warming guys, they said, oh, look, carbon dioxide's rising. Carbon dioxide's rising. And so they made projections of carbon dioxide rising and rising and rising at more or less the same rate that it was. And then they made assumptions about what would happen if carbon dioxide rose to a certain level. And then they called it global warming and tried to sell it all to us and come up with money to make Al Gore rich in his carbon market, right? Yep. And really, carbon dioxide was a trailing indicator. As carbon dioxide reaches its peak, we're already into a cooling trend by then. And during the cooling period of time, the oceans reabsorb all the carbon dioxide. And this is just the cycle in which it works. But so making projections about trend lines on some of these things is a little dodgy in terms of what you're actually, are you looking at a leading indicator or a following indicator? And you don't know until the conditions shift. And we're into that shift right now. That's, again, the Chinese, they're pretty savvy at the government level, and I think they're also pretty afraid.
Wow. Well, so we were talking a little earlier about the Chinese thing, I'd asked you about the report coming up, which I guess it's a crypto report, not an alto, right? You're done doing altos for
Correct.
now? Okay.
Right.
You mentioned
because
you had to
too
kind
lazy.
of, no, I wouldn't say too lazy. It takes a lot of damn time, and
yeah.
you've got two to do. So, yeah, like I was telling people
Yeah.
on my channel, if I was Cliff, I'd probably pick the crypto one too. That can help us the most. We could all make some money, maybe pick some of these things and, deal with some crap that's coming down in the future. His web reports have been telling us the same stuff basically for years. We know what's going to be coming.
I'm tired of it. Yeah.
Let's focus on cryptos where we can make a
I
change.
wouldn't say make money though. I'd say make cryptos, not make money.
No, that's right. We got to make
Yeah.
a coin while the sun shines.
There you go.
Yeah, you make your cryptos. Don't make money.
Make cryptos. So I had somebody ask me a question like, "Hey, can you ask Cliff this?" And so I said, "All right, silver $600. We've heard about that number for a long time. Is there any data? Because you seem to focus a little bit on metals when you do those reports. Sometimes it seems like it. So would you still say that this is definitely a possibility for sure? It's just a matter of it's just time.
It's just it's the manipulation. Okay.
Yeah.
So the emotional components are there. There's no question. Now we have the mechanism, at least described in the data, that is going to break silver free, and it's the cryptocurrency tie that's going to be used between miners and producers of goods that require silver. And so it'll be, the phone factories in China, the solar panel producers, and also the producers of all this other exotic new technology stuff that will require silver in a decent flowing market. And as part of all of that, we're going to have the impetus of Mexico deciding, okay, the Norte Americano dollar is basically shit, and we're going to have to get onto something else. We don't necessarily really want to deal in yuan. It's a little inconvenient. So what else is out there? And so there's a lot of data sets around the idea of officialdom, probably not in the current officialdom in Mexico, but soon to arrive officialdom in Mexico that is going to start making a space, so to speak, an environment that will allow cryptocurrencies to come on in relative to how they do mining in silver. And so once we've got that, it is the last nail in the coffin to the manipulation at the exchanges, the U.S. exchanges for paper, silver, etc. They're toast from that point on. And I don't think they'll last 4 months once it's actually up and running.
Hey, Cliff, when that happened, and I've been not struggling, but when you look at the two parties, you got the miners and you got those people who need the manufacturers that need the silver. The manufacturers love cheap prices. And I don't think they would, but they have to have their product. It's one of those things. I don't think they're going to go to the crypto world with more fair pricing until the old world runs out of physical and can't deliver.
There's another mechanism that's described,
Okay.
though. Okay. Because I see it in the data sets, sort of a kind of like this situation. Remind me, by the way, bring up the word atomic again, atomic in cryptos in a minute. Okay, but here's the idea. So you got a silver mine that can produce silver, and we'll just do it in dollar terms, just so it sort of makes sense. Okay, and so the silver mine can produce silver at $12. Given today's costs. Now, we have to note that today's cost, because all these people operate in a variable cost accounting model. They don't use fixed costs, and so that's why everybody's thinking about this from the outside gets a little goofy. These people are aware that costs rise and fall in various aspects of their business, both in the mining end and in the producing end. Their variable cost accounting algorithms are quite extensive, and they actually react to those and the predictions that are made from some of these algorithms about their business model a year out based on changes in current or over a brief period of time in their current business model. And so here's a guy that needs to, or he's a miner, he can produce at $12. But that's not the cost of getting the silver to the a guy who actually ends up using it to make the phones. Maybe he actually ends up paying $21. And the reason is there's the distribution cost, all of the middlemen involved, the regulations, the currency transfer cost from the fact that you're buying with rubles against yuan against Mexican peso or something. I don't know, but there's those kind of variable costs, real costs that don't add any value to the silver. And so there's this value added proposition that comes into crypto silver that is different than than our current dollar-based system with so many middle people involved. And so imagine a situation where everybody involved in the whole system is into the silver of it, okay? And so the miner, he's basing his price on the crypto being offered. And there's two scenarios where the miner can offer the cryptocurrency token as a security against delivery, and you get a basic fixed price. Or there's a system where the distributor can do that for both ends, and either system works. And the guy on the far end, the user who wants to have his low cost, he benefits like you wouldn't believe. Instead of paying $21, he shrinks down closer to maybe $18. He gets a lot closer to the monetary aspect of silver. Because if you look at silver, it has three states. It has in the ground, unknown amount of cost to get it out, or variable amount of cost to get it out. It has monetized or lump silver sitting somewhere as a store of value or a store of silver, and then it has used silver. And the price on the used silver might be $1,000 a gram because of the cost of the cell phone, right? The rest of it's plastic, basically. So you look at the cost on these in three different ways based on who you are. If you're the producer, yeah, you can buy it now at $21, and sometimes you get a cost breakdown to $20. But if a crypto system comes on out, you can maybe, based on how the system works, get it at $18 as a fixed price by buying a ton of cryptos now. Because what you're doing is you're saying, I'm buying, and you're hedging, I'm buying an ounce of future production for each one of these tokens I'm buying. And the cost at that time I demand delivery is immaterial to my cost now. And the cost on these tokens now, maybe they're $18 each, the monetized value of silver, the lump silver sitting around, because that's what they're really competing with, okay? So the miner says, hey, I'm going to introduce a token, and you can buy these tokens from us directly, and we're going to produce as many tokens as we think there are ounces in the ground here that we can certify. That brings us into another issue of trust later on, certification process, which gets us back to PayPy. But in any event, the guy comes in and he says, yeah, there's 100 million ounces of silver. So you can issue 100 million tokens. Right now, he issues as many of those tokens as he wants to put to work selling the silver. And the guy who's on the other end, who wants to have the silver 2 years from now, or if you're Chinese, 5 years from now, he says, damn, look at the value here. I can buy these tokens at $14 each. And 5 years from now, no matter what goes on, I can surrender a token and get my ounce of silver to make my cell phone, or to make my, interdimensional portal opener, that kind of thing, whatever, right? So he gets it at $14 an ounce. So there's nothing better for him as long as there are the ounces in the ground and the mining keeps operating. Now, you would think, okay, but this locks the producer into a net loss 5 years from now. And that's not true either, because the cost that he's going to be dealing in will be ameliorated, compensated for by the increase in the value of the token over time, so that even though there's going to be more expensive gasoline to run his trucks or his big diggers, or his people are going to want more money 5 years from now, the value of those tokens will be that much higher and will have compensated and then some because noting the nature of speculation, will have compensated and then some to his actual rising costs, which are part of a variable cost platform. So imagine the situation even tighter, where it's a distributor that comes on in that has locked up, maybe they've got lots of lump silver to start with, and they issue tokens against the delivery of that silver to whomever wants the silver. And what they do is they have a contractual obligation such that the mine takes their token, the shipper takes their token, and the producer or the end user buys their token in order to get the silver to them. And it is a naturally decreasing cycle of number of tokens relative to the shrinking amount of silver. Thus, the value of the tokens keep rising in a fiat dying world. I sure hope I explained that right. It gets complicated, but it's really workable. And I know some people that are doing it right now to the extent that they're forming some ventures like this and exploring some of this, and they're paying people in silver. Lawyers, accountants, international kind of guys involved in this sort of thing, and it makes a lot of sense, and it gets around a lot of the regulation and the problems and stuff. Because
it's kind of like what Veritasium is doing, taking all the expense out of the middle of the transaction. Doesn't have to go through the comics and the LBMA and all that stuff, and it's peer to peer.
Yeah. And this is a little more complicated than peer-to-peer directly, but it's a damn nice system. And once that's up and running, who's going to bother with paper contracts?
Yep.
Have you seen a token that fits that exact description yet? I mean, I know there's a lot of people starting up tokens with metal backing and that type of thing, but is the token you're talking about out yet?
Not that I'm able to put a name to, because see, here's the thing. Okay, I have the description of it from within the long-term Alta side, from the WebBot projection of the future. In essence, what it is a forecast of how the COMEX bites it. Right? What is the mechanism? So I know this is how it's going to occur, or I suspect rather this is how it's going to occur. In order to find the tokens, what I end up having to do is to run all of the data I can find about individual tokens from GitHub, from all the different sources, translate it all into a common machine language, boil it down to a thick mass, and then do matching algorithms on these fuzzy sets to see how much I've got relative to, how much of the language about token XYZ actually fulfills the forecasted language. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and as of yet, none have passed my 38% threshold. If it's under 38%, I've seen it get right up to 37%, and then something comes along that's 56%, and we just forget about the other one, right? And so I don't trust it unless it passes this 38% threshold. Now, a lot of this stuff that I know, unfortunately, I know of people personally, because I'm the world's worst silver forecaster. They trust me, and they've been telling me about what the hell's going on with their individual tokens and stuff. So I'm sort of half-assed helping some people in terms of their approach and pointing out a few things without getting involved, because I don't want to get into a self-fulfilling loop on this, right? I just want to be an observer, know ahead of time, and buy the damn thing.
Well, here's another side of that. If you're the producer, the miner, and putting your silver on the blockchain is better than the price you're getting putting it on the COMEX, why the hell do I want to mess with the COMEX anymore? As a producer, I'm going to go on the freaking blockchain. It's going to pay me more.
And
if that's what you start seeing.
The blockchain doesn't demand fees out of you. It doesn't demand, a graft and gratuities to get you even listed in there, right?
Yep.
And it's not going to try and manipulate you. Ether, Delta, and those places aside.
JP Morgan can sit there with their 600 million ounces of physical silver, and they can tokenize it and sell it to the market if they choose. Did you hear that, Jamie?
They could be they could be the COMEX killer. So it could be something, Phoenix-like, just like that 1988 cover rising out of the ashes. So JP Morgan could do this as this intermediary. And the only thing that is required in this is the acceptance, not the trust, but the acceptance and the performance of the token through the various different layers. And so if they actually surrender an ounce for a token, then and the producers in China get their ounces, even if they have to melt them back out of coins, then everybody will be quite happy on this, and it will really continue. This little scheme, in terms of the data description of it, is in long-term stuff out way beyond my trust level of the data itself. And so it's not like it's sort of a one-shot deal where it simply kills off the current bad guys. It's like this thing really does work as a mechanism. And so I'm looking at other metals and other commodities in those areas, because once someone perfects the model, what you actually tokenize is sort of immaterial, right? You could easily tokenize this in any other commodity that would fit the same kind of criteria. You couldn't do oranges on trees, but you could do something like the trees in the ground kind of a deal, where you had a fixed sort of a commodity, even if it was somewhat variable. So it need not be a silver company that starts this off. We see that a lot of times, like the very first really good large-scale search engine was Yahoo. And they crapped out because they didn't have the larger vision that folded the model and replicated it around the growing web. And so someone like, could come up with maybe it's rubber, maybe it's chrome. Somebody's model just happens to work really well. And that once they're up and running that way and they've got proof of concept, they fold it over to silver.
Are we in that time frame right now where something that you're projecting is being developed, and will we hear about it in the next 6 months or so?
Yes to the first. I don't know about the hearing about it, right? That's going to be dependent on what Universe wants us to know and how they and how the individuals involved want to get it out. So because there's all kinds of rumors and stuff, so I'm certain we're going to be hearing about it, but whether or not a lot of this stuff is going to be valid, I don't know. So the next 6 months, no. I couldn't say, but it seems as though the data seems to be forecasting. Bear in mind, it is a linguistic system, but it seems to be forecasting the move out of the innovators into the early adopters, and those of us paying attention should see the language move further and further and further into the early adopter phase at the end of February. So at the end of February, in that last week, we should be able to say, yeah, we can feel it. Look at all these articles showing up here, and look at this, I don't know, model airplane club writing about tokenized, propeller shafts or something. Who knows, right? But the language will be spreading out such that we've got that in that part of February. As a result of that, from that point on, the pattern becomes really established. So next spring is just going to be really strange because it's a crypto spring and it goes for a couple of years. So not weather-wise, but the cryptos are going to have a flush, and I think it'll be replicating the very heady early successful years in major stock markets, where they would have decades of really positive outcome of all of the trading activities in a general sense and so on without major crashes. I'm not talking about current dollar-based stock market, except there was a brief period like from 1915, I think, maybe to 1918 or so, where it enjoyed a rising flush, even in the general degradation of the end of World War I. And then it boomed in with the period of prohibition and the roaring 20s. And so we're going to see that in cryptos, and it may be compressed into only a couple of years, but it starts in spring of next year. I
was talking to one of my subscribers about salt, and he's all excited about salt lending because he wants to use the product, but he was also saying, it's kind of capped though how high that coin can go. And because the cryptos are only 150 billion or whatever the total market cap, and I was like, hang on, everything can be tokenized, and you can use those tokens as collateral. Given the parameters of what Salt is trying to set up, they don't have any. Their Oracle and all that will sell up stuff and handle the collateral coverage thing. There is no limit to what can be tokenized. You can take the whole 100 quadrillion of all monetary assets and tokenize them in some way through this technology. There really is no limit on what can be used as collateral if they get tokenized and it's done properly.
You got to watch out though, that you're starting to sound like AC coin there. Tokenize the world.
It's all centralized.
Yeah.
Going through what's her name? Lynette Zhang's server. Oh no.
And I finally got a reply back from a Chinese person over there, and told me who to contact. So I contacted them. No reply. I contacted them, added the other person, the Chinese person, CC'd them. No reply. And then I finally just replied to the Chinese person, hey, you see I'm trying to contact this person. Oh, well, contact this number, give me some Chinese number to call somebody. And I'm just like,
They're probably in hiding now because they're in China. And
I was going to say, ACC, what? Now what? The World Bank, the IMF can't use it because ICOs are on lockdown in China, so there goes AC Chain. Nonsense. But
it's another boogeyman.
Yeah, so you mentioned, to remind you, atomic and cryptos.
Yeah, okay. So there have been some really successful things going down in China, okay, that impact and peripherally in China. So it's not. I'm not saying that it's a Chinese technology or anything, because it's actually operating on servers here and this kind of a thing. But the Chinese have an interest in this, especially trying to get wealth out of the Chinese currency. And that's fundamentally what it is. The people over there don't trust the Chinese money because of the history of the crashes, the revolutions, and all of this kind of thing. So they're all for cryptos. The Chinese government can't shut them down, and they can at best try and control it through very heavy-handed tactics, but they're still going to have capital flight. And the capital flight is still going to be wealth being transferred into cryptocurrencies and this kind of a deal. But there have been limitations on this. In other words, you've always had to go through some form of an exchange to transfer cryptocurrencies safely, right? Or quasi-safely, because while your cryptos are on the exchange, they're vulnerable to that exchange getting wonky or getting torn up or sued or shut down or something. Not that that's happened in any huge degree, but it happens to the Chinese more frequently than us. And so there have been Chinese backers to this idea of atomic level currency swaps, and they've had successful ones. Decred to Litecoin, Litecoin to XRP, and a couple of others. And basically, it's peer-to-peer token swapping, and done safely. And the scheme is would make Satoshi smile. It's really cool. And what they do is there's say a company wants to sell or accept they accept Litecoin, and they sell ice cream bars. And you come on in, you desperately want an ice cream bar, but you only have Decred or some other crypto. What they do is they've got an algorithm that's open source, everybody can use it. It's a smart contract. And it's smart contract swaps peer-to-peer of cryptos. And so they're going to give you change in Litecoin for your Decred payment, which they don't accept Decred. They don't accept XRP. Doesn't matter. What they do is you guys both put your coins into the calculator in the contract, and the person who's doing the purchasing comes up with a secret, okay? And that secret is hashed. And the hash is given to the seller of the ice cream bar. And so he's got the hash code, but you can't reverse a hash code. There's no way you can take a hash code and run it through something and come up with the seed words or any of that. It just doesn't work. And so the hash doesn't do him any good, because he needs to actually type in the secret that goes to that hash in order for that hash to release the Decred payment for the ice cream bar. But he's got a third of it anyway, or 2/3 of it. He's got the commitment to pay the Decred, and he's got the hash. He just doesn't have the secret. He puts in the change amount in Litecoin into that same contract, and it goes against that same hash. Now, he can hand the ice cream bar to the purchaser, and the only thing he ever has at risk is right there physically with him, the ice cream bar going into this guy's hand. The guy can't actually get his change from the Decred purchase, so to speak, from the there, unless he gives out the secret. And as soon as he gives out the secret, that the shop owner can claim the Decred and instantly move it over as Litecoin and sell it. And it's because of this atomic level swaps. So they're atomic level, so to speak, in that there's not a centralized exchange there. So if Joe wanted to sell me Veritasium, and I wanted to pay him in Bitcoin, I could put Bitcoin into the contract with this hash, give him the hash, he attaches that hash code to the Veritasium, and in the contract won't unlock the Veritasium for me until I release the secret that caused that hash code to exist. The minute I put that secret into the contract, it is also given to Joe, and he's able to get out the Bitcoin I paid him. So it's a trustless, peer-to-peer currency swap level. It's not really an exchange. You get it?
Yep.
I heard Charlie Lee talking about that he had just done this on his Twitter. I'd had an atomic swap Litecoin for Bitcoin, and it worked. And he was all excited.
It's cool as hell.
Is it faster than...
Oh, yeah. It's not an exchange, because the contract The only delay in this is how long it takes the person that initiates the contract to decide to actually type in the secret that opens up the hash on both ends of it. So you could create a contract. It's got all kinds of interesting uses if you think about it, all right? Say that you wanted to get some money out of a country. You could make a contract with yourself so that you know the secret, you have both parts of it, you put it into a contract, the money, the cryptos disappear, so to speak, because they're locked up in the contract. You go somewhere else, you open up the contract and get your money out. Or if I wanted to deal cross-country. So this is something that's really got the Chinese officialdom scared, because now there won't be a central place for them to go to shut down current cryptocurrency to cryptocurrency exchanges, because it can be peer-to-peer on a level they can't monitor, because it'll be smart contracts. The smart contract concept currently runs on Ethernet, but need not. It can run on Litecoin, some of these other net. You could even tweak it a bit and make it run on Bitcoin. And so it's a marvelous way to suddenly, the whole planet now has a way around currency exchanges, and therefore the ability of governments to track this stuff and tax this stuff.
Do you think, because you'd mentioned in your webbot, it could be several weeks off with the Litecoin triple digits. We got close. It was $86, which was pretty insane. But do you think it's this kind of thing where Litecoin may make a big announcement? We're going to, and then people start developing apps and wallets and things that do this using Litecoin's network.
Yep. And once you've got the open source, the contracts, you can call them up on your own to create them. So see, this is going to be changing of a lot of the cryptocurrency models, the ICO models. Thus, you can see why I'm not a big fan of those kind of places that say, well, our big benefit to the planet is we're going to produce smart contracts for anybody. You don't have to know how to program, right? Because they're going to be put out of business by open source smart contracts. There's absolutely no question about it. And that'll be the only way to validate this, that you're dealing with a smart contract that you can trust, is to actually look at the code. And because smart contracts are really simple, they're, the basic guts of them are relatively small, and it's the carrier part that's really the tedious code. They'll be almost readable in whatever language you happen to be in. And then we'll have graphic. Right now it works at a text level, but soon we'll have a graphic user interface over it. And then boom, it just goes crazy. And once you're doing that, imagine somebody in China that simply wants to change wealth, one form for another. And all of a sudden they don't have to worry about passing their interest in something other than the official Chinese currencies through an exchange. They don't have to be labeled, identified, marked. They don't have to go to any of the trouble to try and hide their identity, because their identity is hidden by the nature of the contract itself. And they can have confidence in it because they'll be able to pull up this little tiny chunk of software, open up a contract and say, hey, I got 5 Bitcoin. I want, to sell it for X number of Litecoin. Any takers? And there'll be kiosks that'll spring up. There'll be companies that will exist that will do nothing more than aggregate contracts and notices thereof, so that you'll have huge software databases that'll do matching, and they won't match people. They'll just say, hey, this contract exists, and you'll say, oh yeah, I want to trade my Bitcoin for some alligator feet or whatever, right? But this is the kind of stuff that's just going to blow it open. This is what China is desperately afraid of, as most governments are.
Yeah, and I can see why.
This is all in your data, right?
Yeah.
So anybody out there who's worried about the latest FUD that government's going to shut down your Bitcoin and there'll be no cryptocurrencies in the future, you need to get over it. The world is moving on, and these really cool things are coming. So, now is the time to load up, if you ask me. Absolutely load up on the smart companies that are being invented and the cryptocurrencies that are going to be around. They're not hard to figure out which is the best in each category. And load up, and then just hodl them. Hold on for dear life.
Exactly, yeah.
Because the rest of the world, especially, all this stuff is going to be happening while the old world is imploding upon itself with all its problems of way too much debt with the counties and the local governments and the state debt and imploding
pensions, all that crap.
Pension funds. Yep. Everything's going to be blowing up. Meanwhile, all this cool stuff is being invented right next door, so that the transition can be a hell of a lot easier than what it would be.
It's going to be rough, though. I mean, there's no getting around it. People that are dependent on pensions, and then with the weather disasters hitting the pension funds, and then at some point it's going to dawn on everybody that the United States government's largest asset is student debt. And and then now we're actually getting out to that point in the language where you see articles about in the mainstream about, is a college education worth the debt? And so we're at the death knell of that whole system. It's crumbling underneath their feet there, and I don't know what's going to take its place, but we need something. I saw this curious headline the other day. There's a national shortage in doctors, nurses, engineers, dentists, plumbers, yada yada yada, another 20 or 30 professions there. And yet we have the highest number of people in college ever. So something does not compute.
What are they doing? I mean,
exactly. What are they teaching?
I know what I did in college, but what are they teaching, and what are these people they're getting out and going back to live with mom and dad? I don't know what is going on.
Yeah, they're not teaching anything that is of practical demand in the social order. The Germans used to have this really cool system when I was there, where they had actually determined at a national level, we need 96,000 plumbers in operation over these next 5 years, and we got to start planning, how much of our high schools, let's find the plumbers in our high schools and start training them then so that they're productive at age 17, 18, 19, and 20, as opposed to letting them go to college, fail, and then making them a plumber, right? Yeah. Because there's a lot of people that shouldn't go to college. It doesn't benefit them any, and in fact, it can do them a lot of harm with binge drinking, that kind of deal.
Yeah, and they get out and they have no skill. They could have spent 4 years learning a skill.
Yeah, and it's highly profitable.
And they got huge debt now they got to pay off.
Exactly. So, and we see even in IT professions, I saw a lot of guys that went to college, took some various different kinds of degrees, and then ended up having to go back for IT certification just in order to get a real job that paid.
Yeah, and I know people that have gone to, these colleges that, just like an IT, come here and get your IT, certification or whatever, and you don't even have to really go to college. You just go in here. We'll teach you how to get this certificate or your Cisco or MCSE or whatever. And next thing you know, they go in there, pay $10,000 or something, and they're out, getting jobs. Now I do know some of those are a little fishy though, because I remember someone telling me they went to one of those and like, oh, we help you with job placement, and then it's like a bulletin board on the hallway, like local ads. But nonetheless, you at least get your certification. You can, ultimately land a job. You didn't have to go to college and all that crap. But the $10,000.
Well, but right now, this is the getting back to that previous subject about the demand. Okay, right now, certification be damned. If you've got somebody that knows how to code smart contracts, to write distributed applications, I can't find any of my former contacts that doesn't have work that wants any. I've got a lot of people saying, hey, do you know someone that can code this or that or the other thing? And it's like, I used to, but they're all working for somebody else at the moment.
Yeah.
And
you said that years back. You said the most important job is going to be learning how to code. Everybody's got to learn how to code. That was like 3 or 4 years ago, as I recall.
And it's getting, and here it is. And it's really acute at the moment because we're now also making a transition into a different kind of a social order at, like the plumbing level. Okay. So we're having breakthroughs in software and software control systems. We're having breakthroughs in materials, and we're having breakthroughs in how those materials are used. And because software and the control systems exist, we're not taking the other two ways that we might have otherwise. In other words, we may invent a new kind of rubber gaskets, for instance, in engines or in plumbing, and high pressure plumbing like boilers and this kind of thing. But because we've got computer control and all of this kind of stuff, now we figure out a way to put sensors in there and link them up to a computer, and so it can tell us the degradation level or pressure on the gasket as we're going along, such that the gasket will tell us ahead of time when it's wearing out. And so the software is extremely valuable, adding in all of these levels of efficiency the way that we have never had before. And so, but because of that, it's altering the way that those materials are created, and as well as how they're installed and used. So instead of just producing a regular old gasket and having a regular old plumber put it in, now you got to have somebody that understands all the codes to plug in to tell the gasket to be smart in its particular application, right? Because you've got to be able to set the variance levels on the pressure sensors within the gasket that tell it it's degrading, and let it know that, you know, that this is the range of pressure you can expect. And if you get anything outside of this range, well, you better let somebody know so that they can come and replace you. And so it's the George Jetson world emerging around us at the level of the gaskets. And think of all of the quadrillions of gaskets we got to replace. So, you know, so even plumbers got a code. Exactly. You know, and so pretty soon, no, it'll get to the point where I think that we'll actually have robots that will help us do a lot of this. But then the plumber will be the guy who's actually bossing the gang of robots that come on in, that drill the hole precisely and put the gasket on it and punch the pipe through and all of that kind of crud. So it's getting to be a strange world that way. Coding is really required. Yeah.
There you go. Everybody who has a kid, send your kid to college only to code. Probably not even go to college. You can learn it probably online.
Yeah. That's the way to do it, is to learn it online. There's so many communities that'll teach you coding, and everything from forums, GitHub, you know, all the way through to YouTube. YouTube's a great place to start. And if you're a kid, there's all kinds of cool stuff like Arduinos, and, you know, and those are really nice devices. Raspberry Pi, some of these little devices will actually prepare you for working on big things.
Yeah.
You know, and people take the, I know a guy that's got Raspberry Pi, and he's basically making his own telephone for some obscure reasons. And so now he's reinventing the SIM chips in software and putting it into a Raspberry Pi. His feeling is that then it sort of makes sense if you think about it. If there's going to be generally available computing platforms, then why not make your device software? And so you could, you know, oh yeah, this actual physical device is dead. I can just transfer the software to another device that doesn't even have to be like this one. Throw that one away, and I've got all of my phone functions again. That kind of thing, right? And it makes a lot of sense. And so this way, he's thinking about convergence at a different level relative to devices and software. And you can see where this goes. If you work it often enough or long enough, then we will get to the point where we can have some level of programmable matter. And this becomes almost magical, and it goes back to 1947, where the the report of the PR guy at the crash, where he took some of the material back and supposedly showed it to his wife and his kid. Yeah, exactly, Roswell. Yeah, he had a part of a beam that had funny markings on it. That was, you know, not hieroglyph, but clearly glyph-like and so on. Well, what you see very often overlooked, really, is some language that came out of Corso and a couple of the other people about that event, and some language that you can find replicated in people that were reverse engineering this kind of stuff. So like some of the stuff that Bob Lazar talked about. All independent, but all language goes to the idea of, you got that beam, it's got 20 different symbols on it, it's torn and it's a chunk, and you come along with a machine and you cut off that part of the beam that's got that last symbol, and the beams start changing. And so it's like, whoa, wait a second, what happened here? And then you take the piece with the last symbol on it, and you put it right up there and hold it right there, and the beam goes back close to what it was like before. So the symbols being in contact with that material made that material react. It was a smart material. You know, in the past, we would have thought of that as magic, taken the guy that had it, called him a wizard, and given him lots of money or burned him at the stake, depending on your inclination. These days, we know that, you know, there's such things as smart software, smart devices, and so on. And here we go. We're now getting up to the point where we're getting really close to smart materials.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's obvious that would be next. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would happen to the vast majority of humanity that isn't up to speed? Is it something where all this new technology will take care of their basic necessities, food, water, clothing, but they're gonna, how would they contribute? Would they get to do whatever they want because everything's automated now? Or how would that all work with the way society runs today, where you should be out there getting a job, or you're gonna starve to death? How would that
That's
work in a
but see, that's mind control, right? That's a mind control version of humanity. So social orders exist. I've visited some of them as a kid where nobody worked. So you used to be able to sail along some of these islands in the Gulf region and along what eventually became the intercoastal waterway off the East Coast, right? When I was a kid, they were building that waterway. It's not natural. All those barrier islands were constructed, as hurricane defense and so on. There used to be islands there where nobody had jobs because they were able to make an adequate living from about 2 to 3 hours worth of mucking about in a day. They were fishermen or whatever that didn't take it seriously enough to try and make money because there was no need. They didn't really have much contact with the mainland. All their needs were taken care of. So they had a social order where the concept of jobs and work were not synonymous in any way. So I don't know that, this is something that the science fiction writers and philosophers have been wrestling with ever since the Fabian Society in the 1800s. What do you do when you've got a mass leisure class and you start moving into basically what amounts to monetary deflation? And by monetary deflation, we're actually talking about your money purchasing more over time because the cost to produce those things drops dramatically because of the efficiencies that are built into the machine. Well, some of them postulate that there would be a great need for culling of people. And so you'd get to the Logan's Run kind of scenario where no one lived past 30 because there was no point really, right? Machines did everything sort of thing. And I don't buy that. Humans are not like that. There's a lot of these things that are projections from the milieu that they were written in that just don't really translate to the way humans are today anyway. So, for instance, if I don't have to work and machines will make everything for me, and I have smart material, well, I'm going to tell my machines to make me a triangular floaty thing that's my intergalactic RV, and I'm going to go out exploring. And so I will be productive because maybe I'll bring back something that will once again change society in that regard, even though it's not a job and isn't work. So you get the idea of Star Trek. No money. Everybody had what they wanted from the replicators and so on, but it was a worthwhile endeavor to go on out and muck about and do shit. It's fun stuff, right?
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, Kathy was telling me about a place over here, just a little ways from us here, Heron Island, where there was a fire at this house. And it's a little tiny island, and they have a volunteer fire department. They've got, I think she said there was a fire plug every close to 700 feet from any given house on the island is a fire hydrant. But all the people that could man this are off island and can only get there by ferry. And so it doesn't do you any good at all, right? But given those circumstances where they have all those goods and stuff there, if I were to live on that island, it wouldn't stop me to go and get a hose, get a couple of the neighbors, connect it up, and basically be a volunteer fire department and muck about with stuff just because I was able. And I think a lot of people will do that. And so I don't think we're going to go to idiocracy where everybody just sits around and gets dumber over the years. I think given the freedom, and the realization of that freedom in a couple of different ways, then you're going to get an entirely different version of humanity forming, and we're right there at the beginning, and we're able to watch it as it comes out. Now, here's the interesting part of this. Recent discoveries biochemically and some other things are arguing that a significant portion of the people that are alive today might have that is to say, people that are in their 50s and 60s and so on may have the ability to have an extended lifespan that might go out 150, 200 years. So once you've got that perspective on you, you start really thinking, okay, and if you really think deep, you can then say to yourself, well, look, I can then visualize based on the rate of change now that we're only a few years away from the rudimentary stage of smart materials. So I know that within that progression of growth in spite of ice ages and everything else, just because of the sheer mass of humanity and the drive for the way things go, that 10 years from now, there might be readily available floating things, that I can buy in my floating RV. I mean, that would be a very realistic thing because the smart materials are coming, self-repairing, they get a meteorite puncture, they're going to seal it up. At the same time, we're going to get propulsion systems because materials are going to be developed that will allow these propulsion systems to exist and so on. All of this combinoric aspect of it. So we're right in that renaissance that's been in the data for since 2003 or so. And the renaissance kicks off like all hell spring of next year as we get some level of, I'm just going to postulate officialdom breakdown of control to where we see a wildfire kind of approach to cryptocurrencies. And by that, I translate that to also mean shifting over from innovator to early adopter. And people don't understand what that means. But say you had 100,000 people and you're trying to introduce a technology to that group of 100,000 people. The way that it goes in an organization that's a closed system where the top-down decision is everybody's going to start using computers now is that maybe 1 or 2% will quit. They won't deal with it. They'll just opt out. And then you find 1 or 2% that are really hot on it. But you really find that 1 or 2% by finding 50 or 100 people out of the 100,000 that are the real innovators, right? And those innovators connect up with the other innovators. There's this lag time, and then it goes from 50 people. They all end up forming cells, if you're lucky, like with Joe and his experience at work and through his association. He's the nexus of a spreading cell of cryptocurrency awareness. And you get a bunch of those in an organization. Pretty soon those initial 50 people are 500. And at that stage, those cells all link up, and then you're on the path. We're past that in cryptocurrencies. We've been on the path for a year or so. Where we're about to go is out of the, say, 5,000, we'll go out of 5,000 people out of our 100,000 people. We'll go from 5,000 to maybe 25,000 active users as we go from innovators into early adopters. So it'll be like a 5-fold increase crammed into a very short period of time. Now, in an organization where you're trying to introduce hardware and all of this, that's the limiting factor, right? You got to get the machines there. You got to order them. You got to have an IT department. You got to have Joe busting his ass, putting on the OS and all of this kind of stuff, and it just rolls on, and that's the limiting thing. We don't have that here because people know how to use their cell phones. They know how to use computers. So the limiting factor is entirely mental. So we don't know how fast we'll go from innovator through into meaningful early adopter. But just in the sheer volume of the planet, we'll still be involved in the transition 10, 15 years out, just because there's that many people in the mainstream. We won't have even hit 50% of the planet 15 years from now. But we're right at the cusp here where we're going to go from this small amount of innovators into the early phase of early adopters. And that early phase is October. Then we go into this lull as the early adopters start integrating and coordinating and internalizing it all and getting to where they're comfortable with it. And then because you've got sort of an innovator class within the early adopter group, they're not quite so brave as to be a full-fledged innovator, but they're innovator once it gets to a certain threshold and they know it isn't going to crash, then they become the proselytizing evangelical group within the early adopters, and it'll just go whoosh. So it's kind of like, in a sense, you're at a big concert and the room's dark. You know that everybody's getting tense because they know the main event's going to start. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's it's like an MMA fight or whether it's a music concert. You get to the point where all of a sudden there's sort of a hush that is communicated almost non-verbally, and then somewhere you hear a few people start clapping or whatever as the main act comes in, and then it just erupts into the whole stadium. Yeah. So that's what we're going through, is that emotionalism right there.
So we're so far away from a bubble. It is hysterical when people come out and say, "Oh, it's a bubble. It's a bubble." Bubble.
It's laughable.
When barely 1 or 2% of the population even knows about it, but they're coming out saying it's a bubble.
Right. I mean, I've talked to some people in our journeys here out doing our housing searches and so on. And I mention just as a routine, and every time I meet a new person now, I just bring up cryptocurrencies one way or another casually. And
I try to.
yeah, mostly it's FUD, well, I don't know what that is,
Yeah.
or, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And then we go on something else.
Go ahead, Vix.
I live so close to ground zero in Silicon Valley, and still I wander around. Nobody knows. One or two people had heard of it, and they'll say, "Oh, that was in a bubble," and that was all they know, and they never took it any further. I said, "Yeah, you're missing out, bud.
Yep.
Talk to me in a couple of years when you come around."
Yeah, when I first looked at this property, and we were kind of this is a few months ago now, and it got to the point where, okay, we're going to move in, and we're going to rent first and all that stuff. And once we were solid, the guy, it's a real estate company that flips houses and stuff. He's like one of the biggest ones in Tampa Bay, from what my realtor said. But he's like, okay, hey, the guy wants to meet you over at the house and kind of show you everything, all the technology and the wireless stuff he's got on the house, automatic unlock the door crap, turn on the pool with your phone, all that shit. So I'm like, all right. So I meet him over there.
Smart house.
Yeah, smart house. Smart house, dumb guy, So he's showing me stuff, and we're chatting a little bit, and I guess my realtor had mentioned something about me and Bitcoin and all that stuff and cryptos, and he was already he was playing it a little bit too, this guy. And so we chatted for a second. He's like, "Oh, so I hear you're into like Bitcoin and stuff." And I said, "Oh yeah, I was like, I'll be honest with you, the down payment that I'm gonna be giving you for this house is coming from one. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Veritasium." And he's like, "No, I haven't heard of that one." So we started chatting a little bit, and I said, "Listen, because this is already when you said get into Litecoin, right? This is a while back when you first mentioned it." And I said to him, I said, I'm gonna give you a pro tip from a buddy of mine. He hasn't really been wrong yet on some of this stuff. Get into Litecoin. You're into this now? He's like, yes. Make sure you put a lecture in Litecoin. He goes, all right. So I never did talk to him because once we signed, he'd already signed and they were done. And so I never did get to ask him, but I did tell my realtor. My realtor's like, well, I want to. He's like, one of these. I mean, you offered. He's like, I'd like to take you up on that. Maybe take me and my girlfriend over to your house one day, and you can kind of show us the stuff. I said, I'll be glad to. I told you that in the beginning. I'll be glad to show you. And I'm like, by the way, you ever talk to the guy that owned the house? Because I'm just curious if he jumped on that Litecoin. He hit $86 the other day. It was like 40 when we were talking. Yeah. And he said, I have no idea. But it was kind of funny though. But the same thing where when I talk to people, I try to. I almost can't even help myself. I have to make it a habit to some way or another. I'm wearing the shirts, and I got people sending me. This lady sent me like 5 different shirts. It's got Bitcoin. It's got all these ones. It's to stack them all. Like all the different coins. So people are like looking. I was at Five Guys getting a couple hamburgers for me and one of my kids on the way home today. I went to Lowe's to buy a few things I could use around that property now. So anyway, I head back. I stop in there, and I've got this Ethereum shirt with the little symbol, little crystal thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it hits the light, and it comes out into the rainbow colors. And I was just waiting. I saw the guy taking my order. He's probably, 18, 19-year-old kid. And he's looking at my shirt, and he's looking up at me. I'm ordering. He's looking at my shirt again. He's looking up at me. I could almost see it, like him wanting to say something. What is that? But I thought for a second, maybe he thinks the rainbow is like the gay symbol. He just probably doesn't want to be caught off guard or something, So he never said anything, and I didn't have time to sit there and chat anyways. But it was funny because he was looking at it. You could see his facial expression. He was ready to say something, but he just didn't do it. But
I'm going to start wearing the shirts.
People ask, yeah.
Amigos shirts.
What's that?
Oh yeah, the 3 Amigos. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
I love that design. It was awesome.
It was cool. It was cool.
Supposedly they're in production, so.
Yeah, those things were neat. And that little that graphic, whatever you sent, was cool. Us in the saloon or whatever outside the front.
Yeah, I'm having so much fun with the cryptos and with everything that's going on these days. And I know that all my subscribers like, when's the next 3 Amigos interview going to come out?
I know, they're asking me too. So to the beginning of the month.
And then a lot of them say, well, what day is it going to move? I'm like, we don't know. Nobody knows what day, but this is around the time where you want to load up and hold on. Just don't worry about it going up or down or sideways. We're investing for the future. We're not investing.
It's like your 401k. Every week or every month, just add a little, keep adding. Yeah. But the nice thing about this stuff, which I was telling some of the 2 people at work I was telling you about, I said, when we do have the capability to get 401k at work, I'm like, with that, you're not really able to stop it and say, oh, hold on, it's too high right now, or I want to slip back off, or I want to put more into it real quick because this week it's down. you don't really get to do that with a 401k. It just keeps going. It's a 2%, whatever percent, you're set up for. With this stuff, you've got control. And hey, there's a waterfall event the other day. Oh, it happened. It kept going. Jamie Dimon's now speaking. Hey, great. Jamie, thank you. Because I just got me a bunch more Bitcoin. I bought some more Litecoin. Thanks, Jamie. It's just, and I tell them that too. And then they're like, okay, yeah, cool. So, like I said, the one guy, matter of fact, both of them are probably sitting here saying, no, my portfolio's up already. That was fast,
That's really amazing. I had some people sell out bought some Litecoin at 42 and sold out at 78. And we're waiting for the generalized downturn, and they're using this guy out of England, his system, and then they're going to buy back in. Their target, I think, was around 64 or something, so they made the delta there in one way of thinking from 42 to 70 into the 70s, but then really in another way from 64 up to the 70s, because that's their buyback in basis. And I'm puzzled about how you even address that kind of thing on your taxes, right? How you would even describe this shit to the IRS. But
I know.
Anyway, they're out of England anyway, so they've got to deal with their own inland revenue service on that kind of thing, and they've got algorithms for all of this. But they're actually expecting that, and these guys trade based on, I guess you'd have to say, inside rumors. They'd hunt down rumors, and that's how they'd contacted me to see if I could validate the particular rumor language that they had heard about Litecoin. And I was able to say, yeah, I've seen the same thing within the spiders, and it has to do with some technical successes. Okay, not the atomic stuff, but that goes a little ways towards it, because the idea is going to be that Litecoin will come up, as the data has said way back when, as a competitor to Ethereum. Not necessarily as a coin competitor, but as a network base, as a smart contract carrier. And so Litecoin has got some function appearing within this, and these guys are betting on that. And so their next target is, their next time they're going to be selling down, or selling out, or whatever their terminology is 119, and that's their target. So they're buying back in at 64, and they expect it'll go to 119 as a result of what they see as these technical things that are developing. Now, what actually struck us here was the Chinese, the government deciding to calm things down and try and shut things down in anticipation of the new 5-year plan that's going to be coming out. And in order to do that, the way that they did that with the rumors and the creation of the FUD and then all of this sort of thing, it generally suppressed everything across crypto space over the last 25 or 30 days, and will do so and lead up into October, into those last 10 days. Then we'll see stuff start breaking out again, such that by the time we're into next spring, there's Chinese ICOs all to hell and gone, but in a much more regulated fashion. And I don't know what approach the Chinese government will take on that, but in terms of how they'll regulate the ICOs. But our data sets were pointing out certain language around Litecoin that I think has just been merely delayed. Now, this gets us into the temporal aspect of things, because you remember back, maybe it was December of 2012, into the first part of 2013. There was a lot of stuff in the data sets about a temporal change, not a timeline change or any of the woo-woo kind of meaning, but something going on relative to how we perceive time. And I'm getting echoes of that stuff now. And 2013 was a weird year from like March or April onward. That was when Mt. Gox went down. I don't think any of this stuff was related to the wonkiness that was being foreshadowed within the data sets about time per se. And I put it down to CERN, or I put it down to the D-Wave computers or something along these lines, producing feelings in people that translated out into the language about our relationships to time. Now, I could have been 100% wrong in that it turns out, okay, so, all right, so I could have been 100% right and yet wrong in my interpretation of what I thought the cause was. So there was some kind of a temporal change there. We're experiencing it again now. The experience of it now seems to have started about the first part of July, maybe into the July 20th period, okay? And also, the culmination of that wonky time language was when we had all that Bitcoin stuff shift forward. You remember we ended July at 650 in, I think, 2016, and that was like, it had moved forward 6 or 8 weeks from the projection. Everything played out the way it should have. We still reached the same temporal markers, but it all moved forward about 6 weeks. And I'm still at a loss as to why that occurred relative to my lexicon, because I'm tuning the lexicon to try and take that kind of thing out. And it occurred then. The same kind of perturbations in my modeling are occurring now from about somewhere in the early part of July. I don't know how long it'll continue. It's within the data sets as we're getting now. It's led to the increased time that I'm dealing with the data because we have this temporal change stuff occurring. So this is the same kind of stuff that hit me in the early part of 2013 relative to producing the reports. So I'm having to run some of these old but still effective chunks of software to provide validation because some of the temporal values are changing. And so let me see if I can describe this. So I've got in the lexicon a particular word. We'll say fortnight. We're just choosing an example, meaning 2 weeks out, okay? And I've got fortnight showing up, and it's got a relationship to 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And then now all of a sudden I'm getting supporting language in other sets that show fortnight is gaining a relationship to 3 weeks. And it's like, wait a second, where'd that come from? Why is there a redefinition within our common understanding of fortnight relative to time? I don't have an explanation to what occurred in 2013 relative to that. I don't know if it was CERN, I don't know if it was D-Wave computers, or if it was this other weird kind of a thing I'm thinking about, all right? So in 2012 was the culmination of two major events occurred in early 2013. One of them is widely known, mostly ignored, and that was CERN saying that they discovered the Higgs boson particle. Okay, not the Einstein Rosen bridge particle, but the Higgs boson. And it's like, okay, big whoop, and mostly everybody went about their business. Another thing occurred, and that is that a study was released out of the University of Paris, and it was in early 2013, I believe. The study concluded in late 2012, and so this was the study on the rats in the C60. So imagine a situation here in a sci-fi kind of a woo-woo world, where my data is picking up prescient hints. What if the data sets are saying that there's a fundamental change in the nature of time occurring, and we picked it up in 2012 into early 2013, and that this fundamental change in the nature of time has to do with our consciousness about our own lifespan?
Interesting.
And it started leaking out because C60 has the potential, if distributed widely throughout the society, to create a class of very old people that are active, fit, and so on. There's, with C60 and the way it works against your body.
Is that sunflower oil? What is that stuff?
No, it's carbon 60. Okay, it's a molecule. It's carbon 60, but they put it in olive oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, or avocado oil, or something else. Okay, not petroleum, guys. Not motor oil. Don't ever drink anything with just because they say it's got C60 in. Okay, it's got to be an edible oil.
Didn't it just sell out because you mentioned it?
Right, but they're back in production. I mean, it's a huge market or a growing market, and people are actively trying to service it, and the potential here is absolutely remarkable. So, but it's getting back to my point. I don't know. I'm merely speculating that maybe there was a wave in the future of people suddenly, or people coming to the realization that their lifespan might be 100 years or 200 years or whatever, and the difference that causes in your mental level of thinking that propagated back and was picked up by us emotionally in 2012 and 2013 as the cause of that thinking actually matured and was released into reality. So that's the thing. In reality, we had two things occur. The Higgs boson particle, by the way, and the way that CERN thinks about it and their language, is all about these guys trying to create the ability to shove physical matter through time. It won't happen. Okay, they're woefully ignorant about what they're attempting to do, but that doesn't stop them from having incremental successes in their little incremental processes that they think will ultimately yield success. So I don't know which one of these things caused this, but imagine C60 penetrating into society where, well, like a few years ago, there was this, okay, so I know a guy by the name of Paul Stamets, all right? And Paul Stamets runs Fungi Perfecti. Paul Stamets is probably one of the top mycologists on the planet. These are people that study mushrooms. He knows mushrooms like nobody else's business. And he has contacts to major corporations. And a story could be told about Paul taking a substance to Bayer Labs in Germany. And he gives the substance to Bayer Labs, and they go wildly crazy for it. Absolutely crazy because of all of the stuff it affects in the human body. Anti-cancer, anti-immune system disease, blah, blah, blah. They've found so many different things, so many uses for it. They're just in love with this stuff. And they want to patent the hell out of it, go into business with Paul. Big problem, though. The stuff is kombucha. Okay, this stuff like kefir. There were three things on the planet that are really kind of inexplicable relative to substances that humans can consume. We've lost one of them, but we still have kefir and we still have kombucha. These are amalgamated, okay? Kefir is not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's not a fungus, but it has elements of all three involved, and it's antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial. And as is kombucha, okay, and kombucha tea, right, comes from a mother like a vinegar. And
my wife is making kombucha right now.
So is mine.
Okay, well here's the thing about it.
I can't drink it. It's tough to drink.
The thing is, nobody should really drink it, in my opinion. My personal opinion, you don't need to drink it unless you're ill. Okay, if you have some long-term chronic illness, then I would drink it. But it's not a generalized health tonic, and people need to understand this. And that's why I was shocked to see it become a tea. All right. And it is, in my opinion, a misappropriation of the understanding of the material that's been made into an industry. And now the industry is producing vast quantities of the stuff. And my Safeway store, which was my point of my story, is just now jam-packed with this stuff that Bayer Labs couldn't patent, but was desperate to do so. But they were going to use it as a primary source of all these healing stuff for people that were really ill, not as a generalized supplement for people that are feeling a little run down. And you got to be careful about these kind of things relative to that, because certain products can drive you. They're not Shen energy supporting. They extract energy from you like cocaine. Okay, it gets you up that mountain, but there's it does not add anything to your system to support the demands it made on you. And so it drives you and you become depleted as a result of using the cocaine. And kombucha is not quite like that, but at a health level, it puts strain and stress on your liver trying to accommodate the chemicals and stuff in it. And if you're not ill, there's no net benefit. It doesn't help a healthy liver. All right? C60 is different. C60 doesn't drive you. If you drink, like Tom Martin was saying, he chugs a whole bottle of the stuff. Well, you got to have a really healthy liver, and you're going to get a huge charge out of just the oil. Just the oil forming glycogen and being produced into energy is going to really drive you there. But C60, on the other hand, is the antioxidant, the antioxidative stress remover is phenomenal. And so it should be taken on a daily basis. And now it's reasonably expensive to make, but we'll get into situations where probably you'll have your home C60 machine manufacturing the stuff. But getting back to my point. So tomorrow, Joe wakes up and he thinks, well, let me see, 5. So my kids, their kids, their kids, their kids, and their kids, and then I die. That would be 5 generations. That would be 5 generations he'd be able to see if the promise of C60 is actually realized. Okay, and that's not even living 500 years. That's just going out approximately 240 years beyond his current lifespan. And so C60 removing the oxidative stress and stuff. So now, so imagine what that means to Joe's thinking and to everybody who's taking C60 and thinking along these kind of lines. All right, so, I'm taking this stuff and I'm sitting here thinking, well, hey, it's not a bad idea to have a place way the hell out, right? Because I'm buying not now, but I'm buying a place where 15 years from now, I'll have my little floaty RV deal and I'll be able to float into town to pick up the milk or whatever to make my kefir, and float back, and distance won't be an issue, right? And if I really need to get something, okay, we can hop into the little floaty vehicle and, we go to lunch in Paris, go to lunch in New York. That kind of a deal, because I know that's coming 15 years out. I will make plans now, getting the money together, building the support base such that I'll be able to acquire one of those things 15 years out. I'll make plans that will be different. So Joe may make decisions now on his crypto portfolio, not for his kids or for their kids, his grandchildren, or even his great-grandchildren, but his great-great-grandchildren, and he may see them into adulthood. And so he can make some really interesting decisions. So now, this means that basically it's coming down to what if the whole planet started planning at an individual level like the People's Communist Party of China, where you do long-range planning. And so first off, a lot of things you just shrug off, right? A lot of the irritants at the moment won't be irritants 5 years from now. We know that. So it's like, screw it, it's less of an issue. Yeah, immigration, but we'll get over it in 5 years. We'll have worked that out, and so on and so on and so on. And so you get a different attitude. You start becoming more productive. The whole planet changes around you because of that one thought that has changed. And this, I think, is super significant. So I think it was either CERN or it was something like C60, all right? So in July, I had no intention of saying anything about C60 in an interview with Sarah. The fact that it's coincident with the change in the data having occurred first, that didn't prompt my decision to mention anything to her. Her pursuit of the subject with Tom Martin, Randy Moggin's pursuit with his source, other radio interviews with other producers, and the burgeoning spread of it. Well, we were only looking at, 11 years maybe from the spread of Bayer Labs rejecting kombucha because they couldn't patent it because anybody could make it, to it's becoming so widely available that 2 out of 3 of us are involved with it, right?
Yeah.
And so 11 or 12 years. So if we're even looking at 11 or 12 years only in the U.S. becoming involved with C60 and that sort of thing, well, look at the huge change in the social order that might occur and the thinking that goes along with it. Because every time someone went to a convenience store and picked up their latest C60 soda pop or whatever it is, every single time you're doing that, that's actually a thought transference as well. Because it's reinforcing the idea that, oh, look, I'm doing this hugely positive thing that's going to affect my lifespan. And you probably don't even think about it after the second or third time you drink this stuff, right? And then all of a sudden you start finding yourself thinking out in terms of, well, 20 years from now, I'll be doing this. Oh, yeah, I'd better start really exercising. I'm going to need some more muscle mass in 20 years. And coincidentally, of course, C60 provides the body that's able to do that even at an advanced age. So those kind of thoughts are like, wow. And society changing.
I'm going to have to check out some of the C60 stuff.
Exactly so, dude. Exactly so. And I happen to prefer this stuff in coconut because there's very little taste to it. And olive oil is okay, but with my liver problems in the past, olive oil is less compatible. And so that's really my only preference. Olive oil is the one that they used in the original study, and it's really effective and so on. So now, and I'm not able to chug this stuff because, again, liver problems. But I know of bodybuilders and athletes that are doing it, like professional athletes. And they don't even have to worry about this stuff showing up on performance-enhancing kind of stuff, right?
Yep. Wow.
But it's a big difference. Gives you a big difference.
Well, gents. Oh yeah.
These are the balls this time, Joe. These don't make any
Not those
clanging.
little Chinese ones.
No.
I got some of those too.
Aren't they cool?
Yeah, chong chong, make that little noise. You gotta try to keep it quiet.
Yeah. Somebody sent me a set of small ones out of shungite. That's polished shungite,
Nice.
which has C60 in it, right? So not enough to be really effective, but still.
Yep. So is there anything else we didn't cover maybe that you think of
No,
about wrap it up?
no. I mean, the only thing I really wanted to do was to tell people to, like, chill. If you're all worried about China, they'll start breaking loose around the last 10 days of October. And I've got more details in the data sets and putting it into the report.
When is that? I don't think we said it on video yet. When is that coming out roughly?
I'm hoping by the 4th or 5th of October. The issue is driven by my confidence in the processing. So right at the moment, I might have a set that's got mostly written up, but if the data is piling up faster than I can write up about what I've already got there, it makes me concerned that there may be something I'm missing. So I've got to stop and check.
Are there
Okay.
many new ICOs on it, or is it mainly the old coins, updates, and things like that?
I've got, at the moment, I've got a big section on the flow of everything over this next year that I'm trying to get out so that people get a generalized roadmap. And once that's done, then I'm going to start concentrating on the individual coins. I've got a lot of data for Bitcoin and BCH and ETH and all of that kind of stuff, right? And then there's going to be some small level of new cryptos that I'm looking at. It's a question of the amount of time involved to consolidate, like I was saying, their language and then do a match against language in the data and see that it crosses the threshold. So there's a lot of coins people would have me investigate, but what they don't understand is that just to look at a coin might take 5 or 6 hours of processing time, getting everything ready and so on. And then once all that's done, then I can see if there's a match. And if it's at 37%, I'm just a little too sketchy. I don't want to say this coin matches,
By the way, you don't ever get any emails from anybody that says, "Hey Cliff, what do you think about this coin?"
I get 100
Oh
a day.
my God. Hey, that son of a bitch.
I know, I get them too. And I understand where people are coming from, but just guys, we can't sit here and look at every single coin. And Cliff, if his bot pulls something back, it's gonna it pulls it back and he'll analyze it. But there's just too many. I mean, there's thousands of these things ultimately. If you really counted every single one that's ever been created, there's thousands of them right now. And
Well, I think we're over 1,100 that I've got in the system so that I can analyze the data when I get around to it. And I've got projections that show us at well over 5,000 by the first part of March of next year. So, and that's just the beginning, because basically any company now that's offering stock, and I don't know how many there are, they're going to ultimately have to offer some form of a token or operate off of someone else's token. So
that's where
it's just
that's
the way
where it's
it-
at. That's where the action's
Yeah.
at. ICOs, no more. Forget the
That's
IPOs.
a lot of collateral. A lot of collateral for salt to lend out.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, you have to figure too that it's funding for all of these things. The banking system's dying. We got all kinds of credit freezes happening. So, a lot of these companies are going to be desperate, and thus Populous. Once Populous goes live, probably early next year, factoring takes off, and PayPal, right? Same difference. Their risk analysis tool is going to be required like mad as we go forward, because we won't have banks, and a lot of the smart contracts will need to have a lot of these things encapsulated into machine code for them so that the smart contracts can make a decision. So when you apply for your SALT lending, maybe there will be a performance rating on previous contracts or something, or maybe there's a depreciation based on the volatility of the particular currency you want to use as collateral. So there are all these stuff.
Do you think it's safe to say, speaking of those two, PayPal and Populous, I mean, they're both essentially in the accounting, invoicing and different things like that, but PayPal's doing the credit risk thing with it or whatever. Is it safe to say you think, it's a big world. These two probably will be fine. They're not going to compete and step on each other and one wipe the other one out.
No, they're not. They're not even competitors per se that way. The risk analysis part, if I'm reading the data sets correctly, PayPal will actually probably end up becoming I guess you'd have to say a legit form of like Moody's or something, a rating analysis tool, right? Because even Populous and these other guys will end up using this service. So if PayPal were to start evolving, they would evolve to the point where they would take all of their encapsulated knowledge base, put it into smart contracts so that I, as a customer, could go to them and say, I have a fellow I want to do business with. Can you tell me what you know about the fellow? Here's my PayPal token. And it then tells me its analysis of that guy in a machine code into my contract. My contract then adjusts my business with that fellow based on what it learns.
And not only that, Salt. Speaking of, Bix always talks about Salt. Salt could use a service like that, right? Like PayPal, to make sure that
Exactly.
The other party's legit and they've got it. They're going to pay the money or the crypto, whatever, back. So
or the analysis of how the crypto will be, the volatility of that crypto.
Correct. And see, there's something else, is that we haven't yet built out our technical layer. So right now, we're kind of like, there's a lot of people that have discovered gold in Alaska, and they're all gathering down here in Seattle, and it suddenly dawns on this guy Nordstrom to start selling shovels. All right. And so Nordstrom hasn't stepped up to start selling shovels yet, right? That's Populous, that's PayPal. These are these intermediate interstructural layers that will allow the rest of the thing to just really go crazy to go on up and get the gold. And so they're going to provide the tools that will allow individual initiative at various different levels to just go kaboom. And so we have this combinoric explosion in the data of a renaissance period that takes over the whole planet over this next period of time. And what's really interesting about that, to me, I won't keep people long, is the idea that some places like the Kondrativ guys and the E-Wave guys, the Elliott Wave guys, they're all connected into a tradition that has innovation being X number of period of years, and then we go into a slump. And this is all based on analyzing past economic data sets, right? But in this regard, I don't think we're not in Kansas anymore, right? Our tornado's taken us out of Kansas, and we're not only getting new patterns in Bitcoin and stuff, we're going to get a technology explosion, innovation wave that long suppressed by the dollar and the bonds, but instead of being 10 years, it might run 110 years or 150 years. So, and it's also all bound up with the idea that humanity itself is changing as our ability to envision living longer, being able to accomplish more, and so on. So right now I'm thinking, oh, cool, okay, so what I want to do is I want to boost my fluency in de Español. I want to pick up some more Chinese. I want to get my Paruski really good, and then move on to Sanskrit. And Sanskrit ought to occupy me at least 60 or 80 years, because there's so much of that isn't even translated yet. The funny part about Sanskrit is here is the largest library of knowledge ever gathered in non-digital form, and we've just now translated the A's out of the alphabet.
That's how
We
we
got a
roll.
lot of work to do.
Got a lot of work to do.
I think we're going to get older.
Yeah, exactly. But see, here's the thing. The big deal about it, though, is C60 takes away oxidative stress, all right? So as young guys, if you were to be taking it now in sufficient quantities, the theory is that you wouldn't wrinkle. You wouldn't show gray hair, that kind of thing, because that's the result of oxidative stress manifesting itself on your body. And then further, it helps prevent oxidative stress damage to your telomeres. So every time you have to produce a new eyeball cell or a new mustache cell or something, not mustache, but a skin cell, something like that, it'll replicate clean without any damage. So you eliminate the idea of general degradation of your body systems. That being the case, there's nothing to stop you from entering into, say, a 15-year bodybuilding program, such that you achieve whatever kind of physical performance levels you want over the course of 15 years. Plus, the C60 makes you super oxidative, so you want it. Your body naturally wants to gain muscle mass anyway, and you want to exercise because you have this energy and all of this kind of stuff. And all of these things lead you back to this whole idea of the temporal thing. What happens to planet Earth when Bix and Joe start thinking about and planning for their 150th birthday?
I want to know what I look like.
I got the hat for it.
Yeah, he got his birthday hat on.
You got the hat, that's for sure. I love those hats. They're terrible, but I love them. Well,
All right, guys.
adios, muchachos.
Yeah, I guess say we're doing this 2 hours and 14 minutes, chock full of good information,
Yeah.
cool stuff.
Good
So
stuff.
yeah, I guess until next time, and once the report comes out, of course, we'll let our people know, and we'll have to. Normally we do them early in the month, but this one again, all of us have been so busy, so it doesn't matter. There's no set time. We'll just kind of reach out to each other and do the next one when we need to do the next one.
Also, Kathy and I are trying to, get a house basically torn down and rebuilt 2.5 hours away from us, or 2 hours away from us. So we're gone a lot more now trying to get things done. Planning for that, 20 years out.
Joe's just kicking his feet up in his new house, not doing anything anymore.
Yeah, and I got some guys.
He's starting to build. He's dangerous.
Yeah, I just planted some trees out there, and I've knocked one down with a little excavator the other day, and I've got some guys coming in this coming up weekend. I knew one guy that would really I like to have done this room for me, but he has like 3 jobs waiting on him, that kind of thing. I'm like, well, I'll just look on Craigslist and kind of find someone, and the guys charge like $30 an hour. He's like, yeah, I'll put up the wall, I'll put up a ceiling and all that, no problem. So he's gonna come this weekend, and he said he think he can knock it out in a couple days, because I might have him do the roof too while he's here. It's got that real 36-inch by 8 or 10 feet rolls of roofing, asphalt, whatever it is.
Sure.
It's just
paper, right?
Yeah, and it's just that's all they had up here. So it's like that should be a pretty easy job for somebody to.
Yeah, just lay some composition shingles over it and go to town. Yeah.
Right over the top of it, you think?
I like roofing, but I don't like being up there with the sun beating down on me these days.
Yeah, I hear you, and I don't like messing with any of that stuff. I'll burn so fast. So, anyways, that's about as much building as about to happen over here. I've already got my carpet picked out at the Home Depot. They're going to install that, but I got to get all this stuff done. So it's exciting though, but I'm not nearly as busy as you. That's for sure.
I'm just older, dude. Well, you wait a few years, a few decades.
Yeah. Or maybe a whole bunch of decades.
The robots that'll do the work.
Yeah, if I'm on C60, I might be on a bunch. It may be a bunch of decades.
There you go. Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Till next time.
Thank you
Take
much.
care. See ya.
Very well, guys.